The Kumiho's prey. Jiwoo walked briskly down the deserted street, fingers clutched tightly around her phone. The sun had set hours ago, plunging the neighborhood into an inky blackness broken only by the occasional street lamp. She knew she should have taken a taxi home from the late study session at the library, but money was tight and it wasn't that far a walk. Now every shadow seemed ominous as she hurried along, high alert for any strange sounds or movements. A flicker of red caught her eye from a narrow alley between buildings. She paused, peering into the gloom but saw nothing. Chalking it up to her frazzled nerves, Jiwoo picked up her pace, heart hammering in her chest. A distant howl shattered the thick silence of the night, the cry eerily inhuman. Jiwoo gasped, freezing in her tracks as icy fear lanced through her veins. She knew the folk tales of what prowled the dark, the Kumiho, a nine-tailed fox demon renowned for its cunning and ruthless appetite. Another wolfish howl split the air, closer this time, sending her pulse skyrocketing. Against her better judgment, Jiwoo took off at a dead sprint, no longer caring about making noise. All that mattered was escaping whatever hellish entity stalked the darkened streets this night. A shrill scream rent the air, thin and feminine, cutting off abruptly. Jiwoo choked back a sob, pushing her legs to move faster though they burned with exhaustion. She risked a glance over her shoulder, wheezing for breath. Two glowing orbs peered out from the shadows not 20 feet behind, fast gaining. Jiwoo cried out in terror, tripping over her own feet in her haste. She crashed hard onto the icy pavement, skinning her hands and knees. Scrambling on hands and knees, she crawled rapidly across the sidewalk before weakly finding her feet again. A low, menacing chuckle sounded right behind her, putting icicles down her spine. Heavy breathing washed over the back of her neck, carrying the coppery scent of blood. Jiwoo bolted out into the empty street, only to smash directly into a furry obstruction. She rebounded onto her backside, gaping up in horror at the creature blocking her path. Its animalistic body was covered in dense red fur, lean muscles rippling underneath. But what caught and held Jiwoo's terror-struck gaze were its eyes, crimson orbs glowing with an unearthly intelligence and predatory hunger. 9 tails swished hypnotically behind the fox, each tipped with midnight black. A Kumiho. It let out a fiendish laugh, baring fangs dipped in fresh gore. Jiwoo scrabbled backwards across the pavement, screaming hoarsely. "Please, please, someone help." She fumbled for her phone but it had gone flying from her grasp during the fall. The Kumiho prowled nearer, stalking its paralyzed prey with unhurried grace, savoring her misery. When it moved to pounce, Jiwoo rolled desperately to the side, abandoning her backpack in the process. Scrambling upright once more, she tore off down a narrow side street at a dead sprint. Her pursuer let out an enraged howl, claws scratching asphalt as it gave chase. Adrenaline pushed Jiwoo's legs to inhuman speed, but she knew she couldn't outrun the predator forever. Ahead loomed a hastily constructed apartment complex, unfinished stairwells jagged like teeth against the night. With screams chasing her, Jiwoo vaulted over a barrier and tore up rickety steps 3 at a time. Her pursuer bounded up right behind, closing the gap with unnatural ease. Heart pounding in her ears, Jiwoo spotted an open door and threw herself inside, slamming it shut behind. She fell back against the wood, hyperventilating as claws savagely rent the barrier. The demon was furious now, hammering the door with nightmarish force that shook all its inadequate fastenings. Jiwoo braced and struggled, screaming helplessly as small cracks began to appear. But through her panic she registered human voices nearby, light flooding down a stairwell. Taking a chance, she abandoned the door and sprinted towards salvation, crashing into a surprised older couple. "Please help me, there's something out there." Jiwoo sobbed hysterically, clinging to the man's shirt. His wife took one look at the girl's terror-stricken face and wild eyes and pulled out her phone to dial emergency services without hesitation. Sirens filled the night not long after as multiple patrol cars screamed up, blocking off access. Officers drew weapons and cautiously approached the raging demon, still throwing its brute strength against the door. With a final bone-shattering impact, the flimsy wood gave way just as a policewoman took aim. Her tranquilizer dart plunged deep, sending the crazed creature sprawling. As the Kumiho's toxin took hold, its frenzied baying devolved into pathetic whimpers, then heavy silence. Jiwoo watched tearfully from behind a barricade of uniforms, wrapped in emergency blankets, as the abomination was hauled away under heavy restraints. An ambulance arrived to examine her wounds, but she refused medical attention, too shaken to be apart from her rescuers. The couple assured her trauma counselors would be available, and that she was welcome to remain at their home until things settled. Jiwoo nodded numbly, grasping the proffered hands like a lifeline, unable to stop trembling. Her mind reeled from the impossible events of the night, from the horror of coming face to face with a creature out of nightmare. Deep within, some primal instinct knew this was no isolated incident. Dark omens were unfurling across the city as Halloween descended into madness. The next day, Jiwoo learned the captured creature had gone berserk and broken its chains during interrogation, savagely killing 2 officers and a veterinarian before escaping containment. Worse, its rampage was but one in a string of ghastly incidents plaguing Seoul under cover of night. Mutilated bodies drained of blood were turning up, some with vital organs harvested. And reports of spectral figures stalking the shadows multiplied, alongside terrorized eyewitness accounts of howling things that looked like nothing human. Jiwoo watched the news unfold in mute horror from her temporary lodgings, gripped by irrational panic that the Kumiho would come seeking revenge against its only living witness. Days passed without incident at the apartment, but unease grew into full-blown paranoia. Jiwoo barely slept, skipping classes in favor of triple bolting the doors and windows. Her hosts grew increasingly concerned for her deteriorating mental state. On Halloween night, with a wicked snowstorm descending upon the city, they insisted on taking her to a refuge center set up by the city. Jiwoo resisted vehemently at first, but ultimately acquiesced, knowing isolation would drive her mad. As they drove through the whiteout conditions, a massive shape loomed out of the maelstrom directly into their path. The driver wrenched the wheel, but it was too late. Metal crunched and glass shattered as their car struck the hulking obstruction with catastrophic force. Jiwoo came to choking on the acrid stench of spilled fuel and blood. She threw open her buckled seat belt and tumbled free of the twisted wreck, crying out for her saviors still trapped inside. But all that answered were inhuman howls carried on the howling wind. Crimson eyes gleamed out of the blinding snowflakes, drawing slowly nearer as Jiwoo scrabbled backwards across the icy pavement. A Kumiho stalked towards her, 9 tails swirling hungrily. Behind it loped 3 fellows, summoned by the chaos. Jiwoo screamed until her voice broke, pleading uselessly for mercy from the vengeful demons. Fanged jaws opened wide to claim their final victim. A flash of movement, a spray of viscous red, then silence fell heavy as the grave. When dawn broke, snowplow drivers, scraping the roads, made a gruesome discovery: 4 savaged bodies crusted with black ice. One woman yet lived, unresponsive from shock as paramedics whisked her away. She would only ever speak of that night to therapists, insisting to the end the Kumiho gifted her life so its kind could feast forever upon the souls of Seoul.